gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do?
Hello, everyone. It's Petty Officer Romero with Job Corps, your instructor for basic security training. Today's subject is one that I love. So this won't be the only one. This will be one of many videos, articles, instruction, one-on-one conversations, because to me, the most important thing that you will learn and take away from Job Corps is how to get a job. And part of that, maybe the single most important thing, is the job interview. So what I've done is I went ahead and took some notes, and I want to give you some personal experiences and some ideas and things to focus on when you're going on a job interview. First of all, I think that it's important that you go on all job interviews. Later on in life, maybe you won't, but early. Every time you go on a job interview, you get better at it. It's no different than playing basketball, or if you're going to sing a song, you got to learn the lyrics, and the only way you get comfortable with performing in front of people is by performing. And I can even remember when I played baseball and football most of my career, high school, and I played a little semi-pro baseball. And I remember I started playing basketball. I was just never really had time for it. And I would get in these leagues, and I was 18, 19 years old before I played in front of more than just my buddies out in the driveway or whatever. And I remember how as soon as I walked out of there and there were 50 people in the stands, and I just got this tunnel vision, and everything that I could do in practice just went away. I couldn't see the court. And it's the same thing with a job interview, man. You get in there and you have all this stuff in your mind, and then until you sit down in front of a person, you start feeling the pressure. That's when things start getting a little bit more difficult. So every time you go on an interview, even if you have no intentions of taking the job, it's important to get that experience. So I would recommend that early in your career, go on any job interview that you can and get experience. So then the next thing that I'm going to talk to you about is, and you may laugh at this and you'll find it funny, but role playing. Role playing is so very important. I'll tell you about one of the big life hurdles or maybe accomplishments, and it really wasn't even an accomplishment because in the end I didn't even do it. But I moved to Los Angeles because I wanted to be a police officer. I was born and raised in Louisiana, but my roommate was from California. He moved and we became roommates, and he's like, man, I'm going back. You ought to come because LAPD is always hiring. But it takes like a year and a half. Even if everything goes right, the process takes that long. You have to go through all the steps. And so I would go jogging or whatever, and one of the things I would do is I would role play while I was jogging. So as I was running, I would just think of what I would say if someone asked a question, because as you become more skilled in interviewing, it's kind of like politics. Sometimes you don't know the answer or don't have a good answer, but there are ways that you could casually move from what they're trying to say that might bring out uneducated or a less than ideal answer, and you can turn it into your own answer so that you don't want to give them the impression that you're controlling the conversation, but you want to control what information you give them and how that you give it to them, and you want all roads to lead back to how good you are and how accomplished you are. During my little jogs and I would think about the things that I did to prepare myself to be a police officer. Now, I guess I should have said this at the beginning, but I scored 104 out of a possible 100. Now, 5 points comes from being in the military combat, so I scored a 99, and I didn't have a college degree. I was told that the reason I didn't get 100 is because I didn't have a degree. And so I started thinking to myself, how can I get the best score? How can I tell people? Because one of the things they tell you in sales, if you don't ask the customer to buy, they won't. If you don't tell the customer what you expect, they won't give it to you. So for instance, a salesman would always ask the customer to buy. And I know it may sound simple, but sometimes salesmen don't even say, hey, sign right here and you can own this car. They just keep telling you why you should buy it, but they never actually ask you to buy. So one of the things that I thought is this this company, I bought a car, and they told me, they said, Mr. Romero, I want a 100%. If there's any reason that you can't give me 100% in 3 months when this survey comes to you, please call me and I will fix whatever it is that I did wrong or whatever service department did wrong. And I thought about that. I'm like, wow, that's great, man. The guy's like already preparing me to give him 100. He told me he wants 100. So when I get that survey, I'm not even be thinking about giving him a 4 out of 5. I'm going to give him a 5 out of 5 because he asked me for it. And unless he does something really bad to mess me up or upset me, I'm going to give him a 5. So I incorporated that into my interview. And while I was jogging, and I'm tying this story together, while I was jogging, I came up with the idea that I'm going to say to at least 3 times. So I'm incorporating the car sales thing where they tell you have to ask the customer to buy. And they say, I've heard people say you got to ask them to buy 3 times or you got to ask them to buy 5 times. So I made it a point that 3 times in the conversation, I was going to ask them to give me a 100. And now how can you do that without sounding arrogant or stupid or, rubbing somebody the wrong way? Like, hey, I deserve 100. I want 100. So I came up with a way to say it kind of indirectly, but I still said it. And let me see if I can remember the verbiage that I used. I said, I did this and I did this. And if there is a candidate that deserves a 100, I believe that I would be one of those candidates. So I would say, I went and I was in the military and I was a military police officer and I took this course and I also volunteered at the police department. And I think because of those things, if there is a candidate that should score 100, I believe I should be one of those. And I said it 3 times. Who knows if that actually made a difference, but I kind of incorporated sales techniques and tying the story in more. The reason I did that is because every time I was jogging and I was maybe 20 years old, 21, I was just my mind's processing. I was role playing. What would I say? How would I say it? If they asked me a question, how would I answer it? And when I actually got in there while I was young and didn't have a lot of experience at interviewing, I prepared myself to have an answer that was just automatic. Same thing as shooting a free throw. As soon as you get that 1,000, 1,500, 3,000, 5,000, all of a sudden that free throw shooting becomes repetitive and it becomes a habit. And so when they ask me a question, the answers just flowed out of my mouth. So now listen, I understand everybody. I've been blessed with the gift of gab. Not everybody has that, but you have to find a way to do the best that you can. If you're an introverted personality and you're not really the type of person that says a whole bunch of things like that and it doesn't flow real easy, work on it. Get better at it. Start learning how to say things in a way that makes you as desirable, as employable as possible. Even if you aren't as good as the next guy at doing it, it's better than what you were. And you have to practice by role playing. Now, I know this sounds a little silly. Some people might not really like doing stuff like that, but you have to do it. You have to get involved in it and you have to do it. All right. So the next thing that I would say is from the start, and we discussed this in your professionalism, the way your appearance, the way you look. Did you press your shirt? Did you shine your shoes? If you're going to go on an interview, even if it's not the job you want, don't you want to, at least it's like going on a date. Don't you want that person, even if you're not interested in them, you don't want them to reject you, right? So you want to make sure that you look sharp and that they offer you the job so that you can say, oh, well, I have something bigger in mind. Thank you, but no thanks. But, you never know. You interview for a lower job, you impress them enough, and they say, hey, listen, I know we talked about this entry-level job, but we actually have a job a little bit further up the chain here that we'd like to offer you, and it pays $22 an hour as opposed to the $10 we were talking about. Now, all of a sudden, and that's why it's important, if it's not that one first time you impress them, it's the next time. All right. But you go in, the things we talked about, professionalism, your boots are shined, your shoes, or if you're not going on an interview, but your shirt's pressed, that you look sharp, you shaved, you got your hair done properly, you got a haircut, you look good. You want to make a good first impression. Now, part of that first impression is the way you come across. You need to learn how to shake hands properly. Go in with a firm. Nobody likes a limp handshake. Nobody. There's a difference between a firm handshake and uncomfortable touching. And that's what you do when you kind of lean your hand in there and you kind of just, nobody wants that. Okay. Get it out right now. Stop doing it. Now it's interesting. We're going through the coronavirus thing and we're talking about handshaking, but one day that'll be over and handshakes are part of it. You give a firm handshake, you look them in the eye and you say, Mr. Employer, nice to meet you. I'm David Romero and I appreciate you letting me come to this interview. Okay. Firm handshake, look them in the eye. Then when you sit down, you don't slouch in your chair. You stand up, and we've talked about this. I talked to you guys about if you ever see me walking around a facility, I always walk with a sense of purpose. I don't just malinger down the hallway kind of walking. You walk with a purpose. You sit with a purpose. You carry yourself like a leader, and people will feel that. All right, so then one of the things I think is important is what to say when you don't have an answer to one of their questions. And this is a skill. It's kind of like being a politician. You have to come up with the answer to a question that maybe doesn't make you too flattering. What if they ask you tell me about your years of experience as whatever job, and you don't have any experience. So what you have to learn how to do is avoid that conversation and turn the conversation into something that's a strength. And I don't have an analogy, but I'm sure I can think of one. Let's say they ask you about, I mentioned your years of experience. You can be like, well, I don't have a ton of background, but what I do have is this certificate. I've been trained in this, discipline. I have learned this and I have lots of experience in this area. So what you do instead of saying, no, I don't have that, say, you know what? I don't have a bunch of experience, but what's interesting is that I do have experience in this. Have you heard of such and such and whatever, and change the subject to something that these guys can appreciate. And it's not just you sitting there saying, no, I don't know. So you never want to go into the no, I don't know thing. Let's see, questions between company versus employee. Now this one, sometimes people struggle with the idea of, okay, they will ask you questions like, Mr. Romero, at the end of a shift, you go to inspect a patrol car, knowing that the company policy is that the person who had the car before you was supposed to do the after shift inspection. And you, during your inspection, find drug paraphernalia. What do you do? Now, some people, your instincts might say, well, I'm not going to tell on my buddy, but listen, no company wants to hear about how you're going to cover up. So what you do in real life, especially in a fraternity like the police officers, you might want to handle that one-on-one. But the answer for the company is always, I'm going to follow whatever procedures are set forward. So if the company's procedures suggest that I need to fill out a report, then that's exactly what I'll do. So you always want to keep that in mind, because many companies, especially, I say companies, police departments will ask those kind of questions, and they want to see what you're going to say. Now you might think, well, wait, that whole fraternity thing, more times than not, the people on the board, they have specific answers that they're looking for, and whether that officer, there might be civilians on the board, that officer on the board would not like to hear you say, well, I'm going to go tell on the guy. The answer is either yes or no. And if you say what the company wants to hear. All right. So let's summarize. We're going to come in here. We're going to look sharp. We're going to make sure that we're dressed properly. We got a haircut. We shaved. We did what everyone do to look professional. When we walk in, we're going to look this interviewer in the eye, and we're going to shake their hand with authority. All right. Then we're going to sit down, and we're going to sit with good posture. We're going to stand up or sit up straight, and we're going to be attentive. Then we're going to make sure that we're finding a way. We want to role play so that we're prepared, and that's a step before all this. So we want to be prepared for the questions that people might ask, and we'll do a video just on those things. Then we want to make sure that we understand the questions that are generally asked, especially by police departments and security companies, and make sure that we have the right standard answer. And then we want to make sure that we present ourselves the best possible way. And all that role playing that we're going to do at our house, in the shower, in the mirror, we're going to make sure that we're saying things that flatter us. We're going to make sure that we're directing the conversation to our strengths. and sometimes realize that, touch on the question they asked, but you want to emphasize what makes you look good. You don't have to answer everything about their question. Matter of fact, you got to keep in mind that sometimes the interviewer has some standard questions. They're not specifically looking for an answer. They're trying to get you to talk so they can see what you're about and how you feel about things. So anyway, that's all I have for this video. Again, you can always join me from 12:30 to 2 o'clock on my Blackboard. We can sit and go over information, have casual conversations, whatever it is that I can do to help you in your career. That's what I'm here for. So for Job Corps, I'm Petty Officer Romero, and we'll see you on the next video.
Tell me what you gonna do, what you gonna do.